The tension in the chamber shifted dramatically as understanding passed between the human warrior and the alien commander like electricity jumping between two conductors. The air itself seemed to crackle with new possibilities as both beings realized. They were witnessing the beginning of something that would change galactic history forever. Commander Jayak straightened his massive shoulders and looked directly at Master Chief Day Park with respect that was evident in every gesture and movement. His entire demeanor had transformed from arrogant dismissal to genuine acknowledgement of meeting an equal or perhaps even a superior. "I owe you a formal apology," Master Chief Park Jayak said, using the human proper rank and title for the first time. "Since arriving on Earth," his voice carried the weight of someone whose fundamental beliefs about the universe had been completely overturned in the span of a single conversation. The alien commander continued, his voice growing stronger as he accepted the new reality. "And I owe your entire species a debt of gratitude that the Galactic Federation may never be able to properly repay. We have been fighting the Void Swarm for more than 3 centuries, losing entire star systems and billions of lives yet." Paused as terrible memories of defeats and evacuations flashed through his mind. "Yet you faced them alone on your own world and achieved victory using nothing but primitive weapons. Courage and tactical thinking that our best military strategists never considered." Day nodded once, accepting the apology with the same calm dignity he had shown throughout their entire confrontation. "We are not looking for gratitude or recognition, Commander," he replied quietly. "We are looking for an opportunity to help end this war permanently before it consumes everything we value." The human warrior continued, his voice carrying quiet determination. "But we do it using our methods with our tactics and our understanding of what actually works against these creatures. Or we do not participate at all in your galactic conflict." Admiral Kim stepped forward, sensing the crucial moment to cement the alliance that could save both Earth and the wider galactic community. "What Master Chief Park represents is just the beginning of what humanity can contribute to this war effort," she said diplomatically. The Admiral gestured toward the other soldiers who were still watching the proceedings with mixtures of awe and professional interest. "We have thousands of personnel with similar training experience and, most importantly, the psychological preparation necessary to face cosmic horror. What exactly do they possess that makes them different from our own warriors?" Jayak asked, genuinely curious now rather than dismissive. His entire perspective on primitive species had undergone a complete revolution during this single encounter. "They absolutely refuse to surrender," Admiral Kim replied with obvious pride in her voice. "Human soldiers will continue fighting, long after any rational being would recognize the hopelessness of their situation and seek terms for honorable surrender." She continued her explanation while watching the alien commander face for signs of understanding. "They will use weapons that barely function, employ tactics that should be impossible according to military doctrine, and rely on pure, stubborn determination to win battles. They have no logical right to survive." Jayak looked around the room at the assembled humans with completely new understanding and growing appreciation. These were not primitive warriors to be dismissed, protected, or carefully managed. These were apex predators who had climbed to the top of their world food chain through sheer bloody-minded persistence and creative violence. "The Federation Council will need to hear about this development immediately," the alien commander said slowly, as the full implications of what he had learned began to sink in. "Our entire strategic approach to the Void Swarm crisis may need to undergo fundamental revision." He continued, his voice gaining strength as new possibilities began forming in his tactical mind. "We have been attempting to fight them using superior technology, coordinated fleet actions, and conventional military doctrine. But perhaps what we actually need is superior ruthlessness and tactical unpredictability." Admiral Kim felt a surge of hope as she realized that their most dangerous and classified operative had successfully convinced the Galactic representative that humanity deserved respect as equal partners rather than junior members requiring protection, Day extended his hand toward the alien commander in the traditional human gesture of mutual respect and partnership. After a moment of hesitation, Yaek reached out with his own massive hand and grasped the offered appendage carefully. The alien grip was physically stronger, but the human grip was steadier and carried the quiet confidence of someone who had faced absolute horror and emerged victorious through methods that civilized minds could barely comprehend. "Welcome to the war," Commander Jaek Day said quietly as they shook hands, sealing an alliance that would fundamentally alter how the galactic community approached their greatest existential threat. "Now let us work together to save the galaxy from complete consumption." The handshake lasted only a few seconds, but everyone present understood they were witnessing a historic moment that would be remembered for generations. The primitive species that the Federation had considered barely worth protecting had just proven they might be the key to winning an unwinnable war. Jaek released the human hand and stepped back to address the entire room with new authority and purpose. "I will personally recommend to the Federation High Command that Earth be granted full partnership status in our military alliance," he announced formally. The alien commander continued his declaration while looking directly at Admiral Kim. "Your people will receive access to our most advanced weapons technology, defensive systems, and strategic intelligence, but more importantly, we will learn from your unconventional approaches to warfare." Admiral Kim felt tears forming in her eyes as she realized that humanity had just earned its place among the stars not as subjects or junior partners, but as equals whose unique capabilities were essential for galactic survival. "Master Chief Park will serve as my personal advisor on anti-void swarm tactics," Yaek continued. "The Federation military leadership needs to understand what we have been doing wrong and how human methods can be integrated with our existing capabilities." Day nodded acceptance of the new responsibility while maintaining the same calm expression he had worn throughout their entire confrontation. "I will need access to your tactical databases, fleet deployment information, and detailed reports on previous engagements with Void Swarm forces," the alien commander agreed, immediately realizing that the human expertise was worth more than all the advanced technology the Federation could offer. "You will have complete access to everything we know about the enemy, plus transportation to any world where active fighting is occurring." As the formal negotiations continued around them, both warriors understood that they had formed more than just a military alliance. They had created a partnership between two very different approaches to survival that might finally tip the balance in humanity's favor. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the most primitive solutions were exactly what civilized warfare needed to defeat enemies that existed beyond the boundaries of rational tactical doctrine. The Void Swarm had never encountered anything like human creativity and determination, and they were about to discover why that was a very dangerous oversight that would cost them everything they had consumed across 3 centuries of galactic conquest. The Coalition transport ship landed hard outside New Busan Elementary School, sending dust and purple grass flying in all directions. Captain Torval stepped out first, followed by 12 heavily armed soldiers from his base. The Valos commander wore full battle armor and carried a plasma rifle that could burn through steel walls. Inside, the school children were eating lunch in the cafeteria. Dae-ho Kim sat with his friends, sharing stories about the holographic dinosaur his teacher had given him. Mi-young was drawing pictures of her family on a digital tablet, while other kids played quiet games and finished their meals. Teacher Kyung-mi noticed the transport ship through the large windows and felt worried. Coalition soldiers never came to the school during the day, and they looked angry about something. She pressed the emergency alert button that would warn Principal Do-hyun and the other teachers that something was wrong. The school doors burst open with a loud crash as the alien soldiers stomped inside. Their heavy boots echoed through the hallways like thunder, and their weapons hummed with deadly energy. Captain Torval shouted orders in his own language while his troops spread out. To search every room in the building. Sergeant Grix kicked open the cafeteria door, making several children scream in fear. The reptilian warrior was almost 8 feet tall, with razor-sharp claws and teeth that gleamed in the artificial light. His yellow eyes scanned the room, looking for any sign of threat or resistance. "We are conducting a search for illegal weapons," the captain announced in broken human language. "All humans will remain seated and keep hands visible or face immediate consequences for resisting coalition authority." The children huddled together at their tables, too frightened to move or speak. Many of them had never seen alien soldiers this close before, and the sight of the armed warriors filled them with terror. Some of the younger kids started crying, which only made the soldiers more aggressive and suspicious. Teacher Kyung-mi stood, up slowly with her hands raised, trying to protect her students. "Please, sir," she said in a calm voice, "these are just children having lunch. There are no weapons here. You can search anywhere you want, but please do not frighten the kids. Sergeant." Grix pointed his weapon at the brave teacher and snarled. "Humans lie. Always lie. We know you hide weapons to use against coalition forces. We will find proof of your rebellion today." Principal Do-hyun heard the commotion and rushed toward the cafeteria. He was a gentleman who loved children and had spent his whole life keeping them safe. The sight of armed soldiers threatening his students filled him with protective anger that overcame his fear. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, stepping between the aliens and the children. "These are innocent kids, not soldiers. You have no right to terrorize them like this. I'm calling the colonial administration right now." Captain Torval laughed coldly. "Your administration has no power here. Human, we represent the Galactic Coalition, and we will do what is necessary to maintain order. You will not interfere with our investigation." The tension in the room grew thicker as more soldiers entered the cafeteria. They overturned tables and scattered food everywhere while searching for weapons that did not exist. Their rough treatment of school property made the children cry louder, which angered the aliens even more. 8-year-old Daeho watched, in horror, as a soldier kicked over his lunch tray, spilling juice and food across the floor. His friend Mi Young was sobbing quietly beside him, and he could see that she was terrified of the huge reptilian warriors. Despite his own fear, the brave little boy stood up to comfort her. "It's okay, Mi Young," he whispered, taking her small hand in his. "My dad says everything will be all right if we stay calm and don't do anything." Scary Sergeant Grix saw the movement and spun around with his weapon raised. The human child reaches for weapons, he shouted to his captain. The spawn shows signs of aggression and resistance to coalition authority. Daeho raised his empty hands to show he had nothing dangerous. "I was just helping my friend, sir. She is scared. Please don't hurt us. We are only kids." But the alien soldier was already too angry to listen to reason. Years of boredom and resentment against humans had built up inside him until he saw enemies everywhere. The sight of a human child daring to move during his search felt like an insult that demanded punishment. Captain Torval made the decision that would haunt him forever. His orders were to demonstrate coalition power and show humans their place in the galaxy. The frightened children seemed like perfect targets to send a message that would spread throughout the colony. Eliminate the threat, he commanded his soldiers. Show these humans what happens when they resist coalition authority. Let them learn the price of defiance. The plasma rifles charged with deadly energy, making a high-pitched whining sound that filled the cafeteria. Children screamed, and teachers tried desperately to shield their students, but there was nowhere to run and nowhere to hide from the alien weapons. Daeho Kim died trying to protect Mi Young, pushing her behind an overturned table as the plasma blast hit him full in the chest. The energy beam burned through his school uniform and stopped his brave little heart instantly. His last thought was of his parents and how much he loved them. 6 other children died in the massacre, along with teacher Kyung-mi and another teacher who had tried to defend their students. Principal Do-hyun fell with multiple plasma burns as he charged toward the soldiers, shouting for them to stop their senseless killing. The alien warriors fired until their weapons overheated, then stood in the sudden silence looking at what they had done. The cafeteria was filled with smoke and the smell of burned plastic and worse things. The surviving children huddled in corners, too shocked to cry anymore. Sergeant Grix kicked at one of the small bodies and sneered. "Let this be a lesson to all. Humans, about the cost of defying the coalition, no one challenges our authority and lives to boast about it." Captain Torval looked around the devastated room, feeling satisfied with the demonstration. Word of this would spread quickly through the colony and other human settlements. Everyone would know that the coalition meant business when it came to maintaining order and discipline. The soldiers marched out of the school, leaving behind death and trauma that would scar the survivors forever. They climbed into their transport and flew back to their base, confident that they had sent a clear message about who really controlled this sector of space. Emergency teams arrived within minutes, but it was too late for the victims. Medics worked frantically to save the wounded while police officers documented the scene and tried to comfort traumatized witnesses. The news spread through New Busan Colony like wildfire, carried by emergency broadcasts and personal communications. So Young. Kim was working in the community garden when she received the terrible message on her communicator. Her son's name appeared on the casualty list, along with 6 other innocent children who had been murdered for no reason except alien cruelty and prejudice. She collapsed among the vegetables she had been tending, screaming denial at the uncaring sky. Neighbors rushed to help her, but there were no words that could ease the pain of losing a child to senseless violence. The peaceful world she had known died along with her son. The coalition soldiers returned to their base and reported mission accomplished to their superiors. They had successfully demonstrated their power over the human colonists and expected to be praised for their efficient handling of the situation. None of them suspected that their actions had awakened something far more dangerous than they could imagine. The morgue was cold and quiet under harsh white lights that made everything look dead and empty. Hyunwoo Kim stood beside a small table where his son lay covered by a clean sheet. His hands shook as he pulled back the cloth to see Daeho's face. One last time. The plasma burns had seared through the boy's school uniform, leaving terrible marks on his small chest. But his face was peaceful, like he was just sleeping after a long day of playing with his friends. Hyunwoo touched his son's cheek and found it cold as winter stone. So Young stood beside her husband, crying silent tears that seemed to fall forever. She held Daeho's favorite toy dinosaur, the one that made holographic displays and tiny roaring sounds. The device was broken now, its screen cracked and circuits burned, but she clutched it against her heart anyway. Dr. Chang Ho, the colony medical examiner, spoke softly about funeral arrangements and legal procedures. His words seemed to come from very far away, like voices heard underwater. Hyunwoo signed papers and nodded at questions, but none of it felt real or important compared to the small body on the table. The drive home passed in terrible silence. Their house looked exactly the same as when they had left that morning, but everything felt different now. Daeho's toys were scattered in the living room where he had played before school. His breakfast dishes still sat in the kitchen sink waiting to be washed. So Young picked up her son's clothes from his bedroom floor and held them close, breathing in the scent of childhood and innocence that still clung to the fabric. She made his bed with careful precision, then sat on the edge and stared at the wall, covered with his drawings of spaceships and alien worlds. Sleep became impossible for Hyunwoo. He walked through the house at all hours of the night, seeing his son everywhere he looked. The kitchen where Daeho had eaten breakfast, the yard where he had chased holographic butterflies, the front porch where they had talked about dinosaurs, and dreams of flying among the stars. Memories played in his mind like broken recordings that would not stop. Teaching his son to ride a hoverbike and watching him fall down laughing instead of crying, reading bedtime stories about brave space explorers who discovered new worlds and made friends with aliens. All those precious moments now felt like knives cutting deeper with each remembrance. The funeral was held 3 days later in the community center where the whole colony gathered to mourn their lost children. 7 small coffins lay in a row surrounded by flowers and toys and pictures drawn by classmates who would never see their friends again. Colony Administrator Yoon-ji gave a speech about justice and legal procedures and working through proper channels to punish those responsible. Her words sounded hollow and meaningless to parents who had lost everything that mattered to them. What good were laws and procedures when their babies were dead? Hyun-woo listened to the ceremony without hearing any of it. He watched his son's coffin being lowered into the red soil of Kepler 442b and felt something break inside his chest. The man who had retired from war and chosen peace was dying along with his child in that cold ground. Neighbors brought food and offered comfort, but nothing could fill the emptiness that had replaced his heart. Friends shared memories of Dae-ho and promised to help in any way they could. The whole colony seemed to wrap around the grieving families like a protective blanket, but the pain cut through everything. That night, Hyun-woo sat alone in his workshop behind the house. This was where he fixed broken farm equipment and built toys for his son. The walls were covered with tools for peaceful work and pictures that Dae-ho had drawn of his dad as a superhero saving people from danger. In the back corner stood a sealed metal container that he had not opened in 5 years. Inside were things from his old life as a Navy SEAL, equipment and weapons and memories that he had tried to bury forever when he chose to become a farmer and father instead of a killer. His hands trembled as he entered the lock combination that was burned into his memory along with too many other things he wished he could forget. The container opened with a soft hiss, revealing contents that had been waiting patiently for his return to the darkness. Combat armor made from materials that could stop most weapons in the galaxy. Tactical gear designed for infiltration and assassination behind enemy lines. Communication devices that could slice through any security system ever created. And weapons that had ended lives on a dozen different worlds. At the bottom of the container lay his service medals and commendations from missions that officially never happened. Decorations for valor in battles that were erased from all records. Awards for eliminating threats to human space that no civilian would ever know about. Hyun-woo lifted out his combat knife and felt its familiar weight in his palm. The blade had been forged on Earth using techniques passed down through generations of warriors. It had cut through alien armor and shed blood under the light of foreign stars. Now it hummed with eagerness to taste violence again. So Young found him there at dawn, still holding the knife and staring at equipment laid out with military precision. She barely recognized the cold stranger who wore her husband's face. The gentle farmer who had held their son and sung lullabies was gone, replaced by something harder and infinitely more dangerous. "What are you doing?" she whispered, afraid of the answer she might receive. Hyun-woo looked up at his wife, and she saw something in his eyes that made her step backward. There was no warmth there, no trace of the man who had chosen love over war. What she saw was the predator that had hunted in the darkest corners of space before Dae-ho was born. "I am remembering who I used to be," he said in a voice like winter wind. "I am remembering what I was before I thought I could leave it all behind and pretend to be normal." The colonial administration sent investigators to examine the massacre site. They took pictures and collected evidence and interviewed witnesses, who were too traumatized to give clear statements. They promised justice through proper legal channels and assured everyone that the coalition would be held accountable. But Hyun-woo knew better than to trust in legal procedures and diplomatic solutions. He had seen too much of the galaxy to believe that aliens who slaughtered human children would face any real consequences for their actions. The coalition protected its own, and humans were considered expendable primitives. News reports from other colonies told similar stories of alien brutality and human helplessness. Coalition forces acted with impunity across human space, knowing that their superior technology and political connections would protect them from retaliation. They saw humans as insects to be crushed whenever convenient. The man who had been Hyun-woo, Kim, the peaceful farmer, died in that workshop along with his dreams of quiet retirement. What emerged from the ashes of grief was something the galaxy had not seen for 5 years. A weapon of human determination and fatherly love transformed into pure, concentrated vengeance. He began to plan with methodical precision that came from years of military training. Every coalition soldier who had participated in the massacre would pay for their crimes, starting with Sergeant Grix, who had fired the shot that killed his son, and ending with Captain Torval, who had given the order. The aliens thought they had made an example of human weakness. Instead, they had awakened something far more dangerous than they could possibly imagine. They had made an enemy of a father who had nothing left to lose and every skill needed to destroy them all. The basement workshop became something very different in the days following Daeho's funeral. What had once been a place for fixing farm equipment and building toys was transformed into a military command center that would have impressed intelligence officers throughout human space. Hyun-woo worked 18 hours a day, using skills he had learned in the darkest operations of 3-star systems. His civilian computer was enhanced with military-grade hardware that he had kept hidden for 5 years. The machine could now break through alien security systems like they were made of paper instead of advanced encryption. Sleep came in short bursts between planning sessions and equipment maintenance. When exhaustion finally forced him to rest, Hyun-woo dreamed of his son laughing in the sunlight. But he also dreamed of alien blood spilling on metal floors and the sound of plasma rifles charging for the last time. The coalition base revealed its secrets under his professional examination. Guard rotation schedules downloaded from their own computer systems. Personnel files with detailed information about every soldier stationed on Kepler 442b. Supply routes and communication protocols and defensive capabilities that showed exactly how vulnerable the aliens really were. Captain Torval's service record made for disturbing reading. The Valos commander had participated in similar massacres on 4 other human colonies over the past 2 years. Each time, the official reports claimed that coalition forces had been defending themselves against human aggression and terrorism. Sergeant Grix was even worse. His file contained evidence of torture and murder, spanning 8 different worlds. The alien soldier collected trophies from his victims, keeping personal items as reminders of the lives he had destroyed. Among his possessions were toys and clothes that had belonged to human children. The rage that built in Hyun-woo's chest was cold and focused like a laser beam cutting through steel. This was not the hot anger of a moment, but the patient fury of a professional who understood exactly what needed to be done and how to do it without being caught. Medical records from the massacre provided crucial intelligence about weapon signatures and tactical movement patterns. Dr. Chang Ho had documented everything with scientific precision, never knowing that his forensic evidence would become the foundation for a military operation against the perpetrators. Each alien soldier who had entered the school left traces that could be identified and tracked. Boot prints in the soil outside, DNA samples on surfaces they had touched, energy signatures from their weapons that were unique as fingerprints. All of it went into Hyun-woo's growing database of targets. His neighbor, Tae-jin, was a former Marine who had served in the border conflicts with alien pirates. The older man watched his friend's transformation with recognition and growing worry. He had seen what happened when good soldiers were pushed too far by the horrors of war. "You cannot do this alone," Tae-jin said one evening as he watched Hyun-woo cleaning weapons with mechanical precision. "If you are planning what I think you are, then you will need help from people who understand what you are going through." Hyun-woo looked up from the disassembled plasma rifle he was modifying. The weapon had been stolen from Coalition supplies during a carefully planned raid that left no evidence behind. Soon it would be turned against its former owners with devastating effect. "This is not your fight, old friend," he replied in a voice that showed no emotion. "They did not kill your son. They did not destroy your family. This is something I must handle myself." But word was already spreading through underground networks that connected human colonies across this sector of space. The massacre at New Busan had crossed a line that awakened something primal in human nature. Even pacifist groups were questioning their commitment to nonviolence. Farmers began reporting equipment failures that coincidentally provided Hyun Woo with materials he needed for his mission. Former military personnel shared intelligence about coalition movements and weaknesses. Medical supplies disappeared from storage facilities only to reappear in untraceable packages. The aliens remained, completely unaware of the growing threat they faced. Their natural arrogance prevented them from considering humans capable of sophisticated military operations. To them, the colonists were primitive farmers who would accept their losses and continue living in fear. Captain Torval increased security. Patrols around the base but failed to implement proper counterintelligence protocols. The Valos commander was more concerned with maintaining his reputation among other coalition officers than protecting against threats he could not imagine. Surveillance. Equipment placed throughout the colony detected unusual activity during night hours. Strange sounds echoed from abandoned mining tunnels where someone was practicing with weapons and explosives. But the aliens dismissed these reports as mechanical failures or natural phenomena. The first test of Hyunwoo's preparations came when he infiltrated the coalition base to plant listening devices in their communication center. Moving through darkness with skills perfected over 2 decades of special operations, he passed within inches of alien guards who never knew death had walked beside them. The intelligence gathered from those devices revealed patrol schedules and supply runs that created opportunities for isolated encounters. Individual soldiers could be eliminated without their comrades knowing what had happened until it was far too late to respond effectively. Psychological profiles of each target helped Hyunwoo understand their weaknesses and behavioral patterns. Some aliens were cowards who would break under pressure, while others were warriors who would fight to the death. Different approaches would be needed for different personalities. The workshop filled with detailed maps and tactical plans that covered every possible scenario. Escape routes were memorized, and backup strategies developed for when the original plan inevitably encountered unexpected complications. Nothing was left to chance in this most important mission of his life. Weapons were tested and modified to maximize their effectiveness against alien physiology. Armor was reinforced in critical areas while maintaining the flexibility needed for rapid movement. Communication gear was programmed with frequencies that could not be detected by coalition monitoring systems. So Young rarely saw her husband during this period of preparation. When she did encounter him in their house, he seemed like a stranger, wearing familiar clothes. The gentle farmer who had sung lullabies to their son was gone forever, replaced by something harder and infinitely more dangerous. The final phase of preparation involved studying each target's personal habits and preferred locations. Sergeant Grix liked to patrol alone during early morning hours when he thought no one was watching. Captain Torval had a weakness for exotic alcohol that made him predictable after duty shifts. Other coalition soldiers followed routines that made them vulnerable to a predator who understood their patterns better than they did themselves. The aliens had grown careless during years of facing no real opposition from human colonists. That carelessness would prove fatal. On the night before his campaign began, Hyunwoo stood in his son's bedroom looking at drawings still pinned to the walls. Pictures of spaceships and alien friends and happy families living in peace among the stars. Dreams that had died along with the innocent boy who had created them. Tomorrow he would become something the galaxy had not seen for 5 years. A weapon, forged from grief and sharpened by love for a child who would never grow up to explore the universe he had dreamed about. The aliens had created their own destroyer when they decided to murder human children. The hunt was about to begin. The attack came at dawn exactly 3 weeks after Dae-ho Kim was buried in the red soil of Kepler 442b. Sergeant Grix was conducting his morning patrol along the colony perimeter when death found him walking alone through the purple grass fields that stretched toward distant mountains. The Valos soldier never saw his killer approaching through the morning mist. Hyun-woo moved like a ghost across terrain he had studied for weeks, learning every rock and depression that could provide cover. His black tactical suit blended perfectly with shadows that lingered from the double sunrise. Grix died with Hyun-woo's vibro-blade between his ribs, piercing the exact gap in his armor that detailed schematics had revealed. The weapon sliced through scales and muscle to find the alien's heart with surgical precision. The sergeant's last sight was a human face twisted with controlled rage. "This is for my son," Hyun-woo whispered, as life faded from the reptilian warrior's yellow eyes. "This is for Dae-ho Kim, who died trying to protect his friend from monsters like you." The body was hidden in an abandoned mining shaft where it would never be found by coalition search teams. Within hours, scavenger creatures native to Kepler 442b had removed all trace of the alien soldier. It would appear that Sergeant Grix had simply vanished during routine patrol duties. Captain Torval received the missing person report with irritation rather than concern. Grix was known for drinking too much alien alcohol and had probably passed out somewhere embarrassing. The Valos commander ordered a standard search but expected his sergeant to return with a hangover and weak excuses. The search teams found nothing, except Grix's communication device lying in the grass where it had been carefully placed to suggest equipment failure. Coalition investigators concluded that their comrade had suffered some kind of accident or mechanical malfunction. The possibility of human involvement never crossed their minds. 4 days later, Lieutenant Vex Tal became the second victim. The young Valos officer was conducting a supply run to the mining district when he encountered a problem with his transport vehicle. Engine trouble stranded him in an isolated area where no one would hear him scream for help. Hyun-woo had sabotaged the transport using techniques learned in covert operations across 3 star systems. The breakdown occurred exactly where he wanted it at precisely the right time to catch the lieutenant alone and vulnerable. Everything proceeded according to plan. The alien officer never made it back to base. His transport was found empty the next morning with no sign of struggle or violence. Security recordings showed Vex Tal leaving the vehicle to inspect the malfunctioning engine, but nothing after that. He had simply disappeared without a trace. Coalition forces began showing signs of nervousness as their comrades continued vanishing under mysterious circumstances. Patrols that once walked confidently through human settlements now moved in tight, groups with weapons ready. The aliens jumped at shadows and argued among themselves about invisible threats. Hyun-woo watched their growing paranoia from concealment and felt satisfaction that had nothing to do with mercy or forgiveness. These creatures had murdered innocent children and traumatized an entire colony. Fear was the least they deserved before death claimed them all. The third kill came during a night patrol when Private Zonmar made the mistake of investigating strange sounds near the abandoned industrial section. The Keth warrior thought his insectoid senses made him perfectly suited for tracking mysterious disturbances in dark places. Instead, he found a human predator who had been hunting aliens since before. Zonmar was hatched from his egg. The encounter lasted less than 10 seconds and ended with the private's compound eyes staring sightlessly at stars that would shine long after his species was forgotten. Bodies continued disappearing with mechanical regularity that spoke of professional, military operations rather than random accidents. Each vanishing followed a pattern that suggested careful planning and intimate knowledge of coalition procedures and weaknesses. Captain Torval finally began to suspect that something was hunting his soldiers when he found his personal quarters had been breached. Nothing was stolen, and no obvious damage had been done, but someone had accessed his private files and left behind a single photograph. The picture showed Dae-ho Kim smiling in his school uniform with coordinates written beneath the innocent face, in human script. The message was clear enough for even an arrogant alien commander to understand. Someone was coming for him and his remaining soldiers. Fear spread through the coalition base like a plague, infecting every alien who remained alive. They had been trained to fight conventional enemies using standard military tactics. None of them knew how to defend against a ghost who struck from shadows and vanished without leaving evidence. Hyun-woo moved through his target list with methodical precision that came from years of special operations training. Each elimination was planned and executed flawlessly using techniques that left coalition investigators baffled and frustrated by their inability to find any useful clues. The aliens requested reinforcements from their regional command, but help would not arrive for weeks. Until then, they were trapped on Kepler 442b with a killer who seemed to know their every move before they made it. The hunters had become the hunted. Psychological warfare proved as effective as physical elimination in destroying enemy morale. Coalition soldiers began refusing solo assignments and demanded to travel in groups of 4 or more. Even then, they moved nervously through territory they had once controlled without question or concern. Sleep became difficult for the surviving aliens, as they wondered if death would find them in their beds. Guard duty stretched nerves to breaking points while routine patrols became exercises in terror. The confident warriors who had massacred children were reduced to frightened creatures jumping at every sound. Hyun-woo felt no sympathy for their fear or suffering. These beings had shown no mercy to human children who had begged for their lives. They deserved to experience the terror and helplessness they had inflicted on innocents before meeting their own violent ends. The colony's human population noticed the change in alien behavior with grim satisfaction. Former victims watched their oppressors cower behind increased security measures and felt justice beginning to balance scales that had been weighted against humanity for too long. Some colonists began leaving small gifts where they knew Hyun-woo might find them. Extra ammunition appeared in locations he frequented, while medical supplies vanished from storage facilities. The community supported their guardian angel without asking questions about his methods. Dr. Chang-ho provided indirect assistance by ensuring that forensic evidence from the original massacre remained available for reference. The medical examiner never directly aided the hunt, but he made certain that important information stayed accessible to anyone who might need it. Coalition investigators found themselves chasing shadows and pursuing leads that went nowhere. Every clue they discovered led to dead ends, while their colleagues continued vanishing with disturbing frequency. The aliens began to suspect that they were facing something beyond their understanding. Reports filtered back to Coalition High Command, describing impossible losses and mysterious disappearances. Senior officers dismissed these accounts as excuses from incompetent field commanders who were allowing primitive humans to embarrass the mighty galactic military. But Captain Torval knew better now. He had seen enough evidence to understand that his forces faced a professional soldier with skills that matched or exceeded anything the coalition could field. The question was no longer if this human killer would reach him, but when and how. The aliens tried changing their routines and implementing new security protocols, but nothing seemed to help. Their enemy anticipated every defensive measure and adapted his tactics accordingly. It was like fighting smoke that could think and plan and kill with surgical precision. As the body count mounted, fear gave way to something approaching panic among the surviving coalition forces. They had signed up to intimidate primitive farmers, not to face a military professional who treated them like prey animals to be harvested at his convenience. The hunt was far from over, but already the balance of power on Kepler 442b had shifted dramatically. The aliens who had once terrorized human colonists now lived in constant fear of a ghost who killed from shadows and vanished like morning mist when pursued. The final message arrived on Captain Torval's personal communicator exactly 1 month after the massacre at New Busan Elementary School. The transmission contained no words, only coordinates that led to the colony cemetery and a time stamp showing exactly when the sender expected him to arrive. Torval stared at the device with growing dread as he realized that his invisible enemy was finally ready for a direct confrontation. After weeks of hunting his soldiers from shadows, the human killer wanted to meet face to face. The Valos commander knew this was likely a trap, but he also knew he had no choice but to respond. Only 12 coalition soldiers remained alive from the original force of 50 that had been stationed on Kepler 442b. The others had vanished one by one despite every security measure and defensive protocol that military training could provide. Fear had replaced confidence in the aliens who once terrorized human colonists. The survivors gathered in the base armory checking weapons and armor with nervous efficiency. They knew they were walking into an ambush, but pride and military discipline demanded they answer the challenge. To refuse would mean admitting that a single human had defeated the mighty Galactic coalition through superior skill and determination. Captain Torval led his remaining troops through the morning mist toward New Busan Colony. The purple grass crunched under their boots as they advanced in perfect military formation. Every alien warrior carried enough firepower to level city blocks, yet somehow none of them felt safe or confident. The cemetery lay beyond the dome buildings, where 7 small graves marked the resting place of murdered children. Fresh flowers covered each burial site, placed there by parents and friends who would never forget the innocent lives stolen by alien cruelty and prejudice. A single human figure knelt beside the graves with his back turned toward the approaching soldiers. He appeared to be unarmed and vulnerable, surrounded by memorials to the victims of coalition brutality. The aliens raised their weapons, expecting this to be the easiest kill they had made in weeks. Captain Torval ordered his troops to spread out and surround the lone human before moving in for capture or execution. The Valos commander wanted to interrogate this mysterious killer before ending his campaign of vengeance. There were questions that demanded answers before justice could be administered. When they were positioned in a perfect circle around the cemetery, the alien soldiers began closing distance with weapons trained on their target. The human remained motionless beside his son's grave, apparently unaware that death approached from all directions with overwhelming firepower. Torval stepped forward to announce the surrender demand that military protocol required before engaging enemy combatants. The human slowly turned around and stood up, revealing a face that showed no fear despite being outnumbered 12-1 by heavily armed alien warriors. Hyun-Woo Kim looked exactly like what he had become during weeks of hunting. Coalition forces through darkness and shadow. His tactical suit was designed for stealth operations, while his weapons were chosen for maximum effectiveness against alien physiology. Everything about him spoke of professional military competence. "You killed my son," the human said quietly, his voice carrying across the silent cemetery with perfect clarity. His name was Dae-ho Kim, and he died trying to protect his friend from monsters like you. Now you get to learn what that means. The captain raised his plasma rifle to end this conversation. With overwhelming firepower, but the human was already moving faster than Valos' reflexes could follow. Training that had been perfected over 2 decades of special operations made Hyun-Woo seem to flow like liquid between the alien soldiers. The first 3 aliens died before their weapons could track targets that moved with impossible speed and precision. Vibroblades found gaps in armor, while stolen plasma rifles fired with deadly accuracy at ranges measured in meters rather than kilometers. Military superiority meant nothing against superior skill. Torval watched his troops fall around him as the human ghost became fully visible at last. This was no primitive farmer, but a professional killer whose abilities exceeded anything the Diao coalition had trained to face. The massacre was being repaid with interest by someone who understood war better than they did. Sergeant Krill tried to call for reinforcements but found his communication equipment jammed by military-grade countermeasures. The human had thought of everything, including preventing his enemies from summoning help during their final confrontation. This battle would end here among the graves of murdered children. The fighting was brief and completely one-sided, despite the aliens' advantages in numbers and firepower. Hyun-woo moved between them like death given human form, striking with weapons and techniques that turned their own technology against them. Superior training defeated superior equipment, just as it had throughout military history. When only Captain Torval remained, the human approached with deliberate slowness, savoring this moment that had cost so much preparation and planning. The Valos commander lay wounded against a gravestone, bleeding from multiple plasma burns, while his weapon lay broken nearby. You thought we were weak.